Hey, we're going to do a short little review on the concept of resistance. I know this is a vocab word that a lot of you have already looked at and know a little bit about, but when we're talking about resistance, there's lots of different opportunities that we can use to bring up this specific word. Maybe you're going to resist schoolwork, or resist cleaning your room, or resist um, bad choices your peers might be trying to pressure you into. There's lots of things you can resist, but we're actually referring this specifically to the concept of slavery. And when I talk about slavery, I mean, we know this was a big part of our American history, and obviously not a good part of our American history. But when we look at who we are as a people, we got to look at the good and the bad. And some of the good that came out of this situation were some of the really triumphant stories that we could talk about that people used to overcome the circumstances they were in. And so there's lots of different ways that people would try to resist and try to make that case to overcome um, the misery of slavery. And when we're talking about that, there's two key words that we probably need to put out there. One word is covert, and one word is overt. And I like to draw little pictures to help us remember what things are. So I'm going to add this little picture up here for slavery, because I don't want to have any doubts about what that term means. Okay? So let's talk about covert versus overt, because there's different ways that people can respond to being enslaved and being forced to do things. Covert ways are secret ways. They're sneaky, and they may even be undercover, kind of like a spy, or someone who's sneaking around and doing something they shouldn't do, or telling a secret that you want nobody to know about. These are all forms of being covert. Overt is different. Overt is out in the open. This is something that's well publicized. People know about. They can see. There's no second guessing what's going on. It's just there's no hiding it. You're out there. And when I use pictures to help describe this, especially a side by side picture, I kind of like the idea of a door that's just cracked open. You can look through, and then a door that's wide open that people can see everything in. Those are the two different pictures that kind of make me remind me the difference between overt and covert. Now, covert, let's get kind of specific about covert. Covert had a lot of different shapes and a lot of different forms. They would use songs to send secret messages. When I say they, I'm talking about people who were enslaved in the South. They would use the songs to try to communicate and and, and tell each other and warn each other of danger, or talk about secret plans and communicate things. These songs were really actually pretty impressive, and they completely went over the heads of their overseers or the owners. It was pretty fantastic way to communicate. But don't confuse secret codes with slave codes, because that's a different term. Slave codes were actually used to um, they were used to try to control and enforce laws on African American people who were slaves, and try to restrict how much freedom they would have, and push more control on them. So this is different. The secret codes is different than slave codes. Keep that in mind. They might, as a form of covert resistance, they might fake injuries. You guys do this all the time. I'm sick. Can I go to the nurse? My stomach hurts. Yeah, right. Or can I go to the bathroom 20 times in a day? Sure. Are you avoiding something? Probably. Slaves were trying to avoid work too. They were trying to avoid mistreatment too. They did these things because they were limited in how they could resist. So they had to find ways, and faking an injury was a way to do that. Faking injuries or sicknesses, things like that. They might work slowly. Just slowing down and not getting things done like they should get done. Um, there was usually a lot of pressure to get work done and get it done quickly and get it done well. When you drag your feet, that's a form of rebellion. We got students in the hallway who walk really slowly to class, but they're getting there, but they're going really slow. That is a form of covert resistance. It really is. They might hold secret meetings. Remember, slave codes were there to restrict people. And sometimes it would restrict them from being able to read and write, or restrict them from getting together and having gatherings, having worship time. It might even restrict them from getting married, things like that. So doing things in secret were all part of this undercover or covert resistance to what they were supposed to do. And I'm going to use red to highlight this a little bit. And the reason is because I'll be honest with you, if they resisted, they run a lot of risk of having some conflict. They could be beaten. They could be hurt real badly. They could be sold off to someone else who is even worse than they were. So there was some risk even in sneaky and covert resistance. Now let's go talk about what overt looks like. And there's lots of example for overt resistance. But specifically, we mentioned what Nat Turner was all about in class. Nat Turner helped lead a revolt in 1831. That's a pretty big deal. You understand, when you lead a revolt, it's like a rebellion. A rebellion, usually people are going to get hurt. Nat Turner only lasted for about 3 days in terms of the revolt, but a lot of people got killed, both black and white. And it was something that triggered a lot of worry with the owners. And this is what prompted a lot of those slave codes that we've mentioned just a couple minutes ago. So this is a big deal. And it's a definite example of something out in the open, very overt. I mean, you can't get around the fact that you're killing somebody, or you're fighting back, or whatever. Another example of overt, just the term fugitive. Remember, if you can't fight back, run away. See, there is really only a couple options you have when you are facing danger. One, you can freeze and just put up with it, like a possum does. That's no resistance. So it's not even on our spectrum. You can fight back, kind of like Nat Turner did, which is your fight instinct. Or you can run away, like a lot of people try to do, and that would be your flight instinct. If you've ever heard of fight or flight instinct, that's kind of, or just freeze. Like I said, that's what the possum is. But Nat Turner fought, fugitives ran, both forms of overt resistance. And we talk about overt resistance. One of the best examples that we had to facilitate that was something called the Underground Railroad. Now, I know that this was not a railroad that ran under the ground. This was a secret network of people and places that would work together to help slaves escape and make their way to the north. And by the way, just a reminder, I always use this yellow to kind of make my important terms stand out here. And you remember the most famous conductor? Yeah, it was Harriet Tubman. She was one of many conductors on the Underground Railroad, but she is obviously very, very famous in American history. Um, and the ironic thing about Underground Railroad is it's really kind of an example of both overt and covert, because you are facilitating a very overt action. People are running away. That's out in the open. You are out there helping this out in the open, but you're doing it in a very sneaky, undercover way. So it's funny how both these things kind of work together. And there's so many examples of heroism and resistance during this time period. The Underground Railroad is just a wonderful example of probably some of the best resistance you're going to see in probably all of history. So that's it. If you have any questions, talk to your teacher. In the meantime, I hope this helped clear up this idea of resistance. And in terms of slavery, how we had both covert and overt actions people would use: secret, sneaky, secret songs, faking injuries, walking slow, kind of like you do in the hallway. And how that relates to overt, out in the open, like open revolts, fugitives, Underground Railroad. And, if we wanted to go a step further, we could circle back and mention um, John Brown's raid. So there's lots of different ways we can talk about overt, lots of different ways to talk about covert. But if you know at least this much, you're probably in pretty good shape for your exam. That's it. Thank you and have a wonderful, wonderful day.